Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on when you watch this video. This is Catania Alvin from London, about 2.5 miles from the City of London. Here, there's an excellent series of classes, and I do urge you to listen to them, those of you who have a particular interest in this sort of thing. Lyndon LaRouche's unique contribution to the science of universal history. This is their class 3. This is the LaRouchePAC. I'll put the information in the description box. Let me say thank you to all the people that have subscribed, and thank you very much for the comments. Very much appreciated.
I will just turn right over to Will and his class on Lyndon LaRouche's unique contribution to the science of universal history.
The great scientist, theologian, Nicholas Cusa said that when you rise to the level of creative reason, you are actually in timeless time. And what I will be trying to demonstrate today is that Lyndon LaRouche was such an individual who rose to a level of creative reason and therefore operated in his time to influence certainly the next 50 years. But he did so from the standpoint of what is often called the simultaneity of eternity, or timeless time. And one of his greatest contributions, in my mind, is his conception of history. Because if you want to know exactly how to shape the future, you have to have a conception of what are the principles which define not only past history, but the future. And Lyndon LaRouche has made a unique contribution to this question, resolving this question. And may I have the first slide? One of the writings in which he addresses this is an essay which he wrote in prison. It's entitled History as Science. And he wrote it was first published February 8, 1993. When he was in prison. And I find this writing and a number of other writings that he devoted to this subject to be absolutely extraordinary, because he uniquely develops the actual metric, the criteria, which you need to be able to judge history. And it's very important, as I said, that this be done, because there are a lot of historians out there who, in fact, are not concerned about understanding history from the standpoint that LaRouche does, which is to understand it from the standpoint of humanity and humanity's progress. Many of these historians are actually the representatives of an imperial point of view, and their entire operation is to try to prevent the development of republics throughout the world and to preserve empire. And as you'll see through the course of this class, the current one empire in the world is not America, is not China, is not Russia, but it is the continuation of the British Empire, or what is better known as the Anglo-Dutch imperial liberal system. Now, in this work on history as science, what Lyndon LaRouche wrote is as follows. Unfortunately, the study of a recognizable subject called history is virtually outlawed by the politically correct classroom of today. Yet, even had history not been expelled so, the history textbooks supplied during the 1920s through the 1960s were tendentiously misleading concoctions typified by Charles Beard, Arnold Toynbee, or Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. From such sources, or such lower extremes as Francis Fukuyama's banal exercise in Lockean utopianism, his end of history, very little of use is to be learned for dealing with today's real history. Again, I would really stress, history is something which is made, and as you'll see from the course of this presentation, one has to. What Lyndon LaRouche did is he developed a mission to shape history and to give it the positive outcome which it requires in behalf of humanity. Now, what I want to do is just mention these four historians which Lyndon LaRouche just cited. First of all, let's start with Charles Beard. Charles Beard wrote something called an Economic Interpretation of the Constitution of the United States in 1913. And what he wrote there is, the members of the Philadelphia Convention were, quote, immediately, directly, and personally interested in and derived economic advantages from the establishment of the new constitutional system. It cannot be said, therefore, that the members of the convention were disinterested. On the contrary, we are forced to accept the profoundly significant conclusion that they knew through their personal experiences in economic affairs the precise results which the new government that they were setting up was designed to attain. So we're led by Charles Beard to believe that the Founding Fathers merely were interested in their personal economic interests, as opposed to the conceptions which are put forward in the Declaration of Independence in terms of the inalienable rights of man to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a principle which is applicable to this day throughout the world. In fact, when she founded the Schiller Institute back in 1984, Helga Zepp LaRouche authored a Declaration of Independence for all of humanity by merely altering some of the language of the Declaration of Independence of the United States to apply to all peoples and all nations of the world.
I want to just jump in here because something so exciting, and many of you will not know at this juncture, that on the 6th of May, I believe it was the 6th of May, the Republic of America was restored to its correct state, all right? Because you've actually had to remove, and it has been removed, and
we are to believe, according to Charles,
the Admiralty Law. Now that your Constitution, you dear American friends, is back as a republic on common law. That has just happened this May. So don't be dismayed any further, for with the coming of May 2019, your Constitution was restored. Your republic was restored, as it should have been as it was set up to be, as I understand it, by the Founding Fathers that Will Wirtz has just spoken about. So on with Will Wirtz of the LaRouchePAC, or the LaRouche Institute.
Beard that they were just interested in their personal economic well-being when they wrote the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, including the principle of promoting the general welfare. Where did that come from? Certainly not from just personal economic interest. This is a completely empiricist conception of human behavior. It reduces humanity to the condition of a beast.
And what is very interesting as well, remember the Founding Fathers had left the shores of England in 1621 due to a despotic government, or whether that was the Crown or whether it was Oliver Cromwell's government. I'm not sure. There's a lot more research I need to do. But that's why they left. So, as he's saying, Beard was just reducing them to economic meat suits, so to speak.
Where all that people are interested in is achieving pleasure and avoiding pain. This is a typical British epistemological conception of history. Now, the second example I'm going to give you is Arnold Toynbee. Who is Arnold Toynbee? Arnold Toynbee was a British historian who, in World War I, was recruited by the British Empire to head up British foreign intelligence. So you have to ask yourself, why would that be the case, that an historian is brought in to head up British intelligence? What he did is he wrote something called A Study of History, which was a 12-volume study on the development and decay of 19 world civilizations. That may give you an idea of why he was brought in by the British Empire to head up foreign intelligence. In a certain sense, he was the successor to Gibbon, and who wrote the book on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. What the British Empire and its lackeys are committed to is finding ways in which you can preserve an imperial system by studying how other imperial systems rose and then collapsed, such as the Roman Empire. This is a complete preoccupation of the British. How do we prevent the British Empire suffering the same consequences as the Roman Empire or these other 18 civilizations? And what I'm going to just read to you is a quote from his study of history, which discusses the process of disintegration of an empire or of a civilization. And this, of course, is what they want to avoid, but this is the basic idea. The schism is itself a product of two negative movements, each of which is inspired by an evil position of inherited privilege. I'm sorry, inspired by an evil passion. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a line. First, the dominant minority attempts to hold force against all right and reason, a position of inherited privilege which it has ceased to merit. And then the proletariat repays injustice with resentment, fear and hate, and violence with violence when it executes its acts of secession. Yet the whole movement ends in positive acts of creation, and this on the part of all the actors in the tragedy of disintegration. The dominant minority creates a universal state, the internal proletariat a universal church, and the external proletariat a bevy of barbarian war bands. Now, there's a further quote, but I'm going to skip that. The basic idea here is to think about the Roman Empire. In a certain sense, what he's describing is the attempt on the part of a dominant minority to hold on to its power after having made fatal mistakes. And then what you have is the emergence of the internal proletariat, which creates a universal church, think of Christianity, and then an external proletariat, which becomes a barbarian war bands. Let me continue. These three achievements are no doubt extremely unequal in the respective degrees of creativity that they manifest. We have noticed that the universal church, alone of the three, has a prospect in the future as well as a footing in the past, while the universal state and the war bands belong to the past exclusively. And it hardly needs to be pointed out that of the two backward-looking institutions, the barbarian war bands are poor affairs indeed compared to the universal state. By creating a universal state, the dominant minority performs the worthy feat of checking for a time the process of social disintegration, which its own past action has precipitated, and thus enabling the temporarily reprieved society to enjoy a brief Indian summer. In creating barbarian war bands, the external proletariat has merely sharpened its predatory beak and claws in preparation for the carrion crow's feast upon a dead civilization's carcass.
I'm going to finish it there. I'm going to do a part 2, but it's a long class, so I'll put the information in the description box. It's wonderful information, and Will Wirtz presents it beautifully. This is Catania Alvin saying God bless, love and light, and things are changing so fast for the positive. Okay, bye-bye.